The polished marble floor reflected 1,000 crystal lights as the grand ballroom breathed with quiet luxury, every chandelier scattering warm gold across perfectly pressed tuxedos and shimmering evening gowns. The soft melody of a live string quartet drifted beneath the gentle murmur of wealthy guests, while silver trays glided effortlessly through the crowd carrying champagne that sparkled brighter than the city skyline beyond the towering glass windows. Near the edge of that glittering room stood a man wearing faded maintenance coveralls, a yellow caution sign folded beneath one arm and a mop resting quietly beside him. No one noticed him. No one wanted to. Yet before another sunrise, the same man would return in a $32 million Rolls-Royce, and every person who had looked through him tonight would be forced to ask the same impossible question: who had they really thrown away? Outside the ballroom, the familiar hum of fluorescent corridor lights replaced the elegance of crystal chandeliers. The scent of expensive perfume faded into the sharp, clean smell of disinfectant and freshly polished stone. Elias Rowan guided his mop across the marble with slow, deliberate strokes, each movement practiced until it seemed almost meditative. His boots squeaked softly against the floor, the only sound in the empty hallway. Years of invisible work had taught him something few people ever understood. Silence had weight. It settled around those who accepted being overlooked, pressing gently against their shoulders until they either broke beneath it or learned to carry it with grace. Elias had learned. His face showed the calm lines of a man who had weathered storms no stranger could imagine. Silver touched the edges of his dark hair, and faint scars rested near his hands, hidden beneath worn work gloves. Those scars belonged to another lifetime, a lifetime no one inside the hotel could possibly guess. He checked the old watch on his wrist. 7:38. Lily would finish her school music rehearsal in less than an hour. A small smile appeared. That thought alone made the long shift worthwhile. Inside his locker sat a carefully folded drawing she had made that morning. 2 stick figures stood beneath a bright yellow sun beside a handwritten sentence in uneven letters. "My dad fixes everything." The paper cost nothing. To Elias, it was priceless. He had long ago discovered that children measured wealth differently from adults. Adults counted possessions. Children counted promises kept. He intended never to disappoint her. A young waitress hurried around the corner carrying a tray stacked with crystal glasses. One heel caught the edge of the carpet runner, sending the tray tilting dangerously. Before gravity finished its work, Elias stepped forward. One steady hand caught the tray. The other secured every trembling glass. Not one shattered. The waitress stared, breathing hard. I don't even know how you did that." Elias simply smiled. "Sometimes slowing down is faster." She laughed nervously. "Thank you?" He nodded once and returned to his mop before she could ask another question. That was how he preferred it. Helpful. Forgettable. Across the hotel, preparations accelerated for the Ashford Foundation Charity Gala, one of the city's most exclusive annual events. Politicians, investors, celebrities, athletes, and executives were arriving by the minute. Luxury cars lined the circular entrance outside while photographers captured every famous smile beneath flashes that turned night into artificial daylight. Managers rushed through corridors with clipboards clutched tightly against tailored suits. Every flower arrangement had to be perfect. Every wine glass had to gleam. Every employee had to disappear into flawless efficiency. Especially the cleaning staff. "Elias." The voice belonged to hotel supervisor Karen Mitchell. She approached briskly, her black blazer perfectly pressed, an electronic tablet tucked beneath one arm. "The ballroom opens in 20 minutes. Finish the east hallway, then stay completely out of sight tonight. Mr. Ashford hates seeing maintenance staff during guest hours." Elias looked up calmly. "I understand." Karen hesitated. Unlike many supervisors, she had never spoken harshly to him. Sometimes she wondered why a man with such quiet confidence chose to clean floors for a living. He never complained. Never argued. Never asked for promotions. He simply worked. "You've been here almost 6 years," she said gently. "Ever think about applying for another position?" A faint smile crossed his face. Every honest job deserves respect. Karen couldn't explain why that answer lingered with her. It sounded less like something a janitor would say, and more like advice from someone who had once led people. Before she could continue, her radio crackled. All supervisors report to ballroom entrance immediately. She hurried away. Elias watched her disappear around the corner before returning to his work. His reflection stretched across the polished marble beneath the chandelier light. For just a heartbeat, he caught himself studying the man staring back. Not the uniform. Not the mop. The eyes. They still carried the same quiet resolve they had years ago, before boardrooms, headlines, impossible decisions. Before everything changed. He looked away. The past belonged where it was. Buried. Or so he believed. Far above the hotel entrance, another black limousine rolled beneath the glowing canopy. Guests straightened. Photographers surged forward. Security officers adjusted their earpieces. One arrival had everyone suddenly paying attention. Victor Ashford had entered the building. And before the night was over, he would make sure everyone noticed the janitor for all the wrong reasons. His shift had technically ended. But Lily had texted only minutes earlier. Music rehearsal ran late. Can you meet me inside? It's raining. A simple message. A father's answer was even simpler. Of course. He slipped the phone back into his pocket. Outside, rain tapped steadily against the tall hotel windows, blurring the city lights into streaks of silver and gold. Thunder rolled somewhere in the distance, soft enough to sound almost peaceful. Elias entered the main corridor leading toward the ballroom. He intended only to wait near the reception area until Lily arrived. Nothing more. The ballroom doors opened. Warm light spilled across the marble hallway as elegantly dressed guests drifted inside, laughing over expensive wine and quiet conversations. The scent of fresh roses mixed with roasted herbs, polished wood, and expensive perfume. Elias stepped respectfully to one side, allowing everyone to pass. Invisible again. Exactly as he preferred. Then he heard it. Dad! Lily hurried through the entrance carrying her violin case, her school blazer damp from the rain despite the umbrella folded beneath her arm. Her bright smile immediately erased the fatigue from Elias's face. There you are! She hugged him tightly. For a brief moment, the glittering ballroom disappeared. There was only a father and his daughter. Did rehearsal go well? He asked. She nodded enthusiastically. I played the solo without making a mistake. I knew you would. You always say that. Because it's usually true. She laughed softly. It was a quiet sound. The kind that reminded Elias why every difficult day was worth enduring. Unfortunately, someone else had noticed them. Victor Ashford emerged from the ballroom surrounded by donors and board members. His attention landed first on Lily's damp school uniform, then on Elias's maintenance clothes. His expression hardened immediately. He stopped walking. So, Victor said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. How exactly did maintenance end up wandering into a private gala? The nearby conversations began fading. Executives glanced toward the hallway. Waiters slowed. Even the musicians inside seemed quieter. Karen Mitchell appeared from across the room, instantly sensing trouble. Mr. Ashford, she began carefully. He works. Victor raised a hand without looking at her. I wasn't speaking to you. His eyes remained fixed on Elias. This event costs more than you'll earn in several lifetimes. Lily instinctively moved closer to her father. Elias rested one reassuring hand lightly on her shoulder. He answered calmly. My daughter just finished school rehearsal. We're leaving. Victor gave a short, dismissive laugh. So now employees are bringing family members into executive events? They never entered the ballroom. Karen tried again. They're standing in the corridor. Victor ignored her. His voice grew louder. Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly how standards disappear. First one exception, then another, and suddenly people forget where they belong. Several guests exchanged uncomfortable looks. Others watched silently. No one intervened. Victor stepped closer. You know what's wrong with men like you. The hallway became impossibly still. You mistake kindness for permission. Lily lowered her eyes. Elias noticed. That hurt more than every insult directed toward him. He knelt slightly until he was level with his daughter. His voice remained gentle. You remember what we talked about? She nodded slowly. When people forget kindness, we don't forget ours. She finished quietly. He smiled. Exactly. Victor shook his head with visible irritation. Security. 2 uniformed guards approached immediately. Escort him outside. Karen stepped forward. Sir, that's unnecessary. I said outside. One guard hesitated. Mr. Rowan has never caused. Are you refusing an instruction? The guard looked down. No, sir. He turned apologetically toward Elias. I'm sorry. Elias simply nodded. No apology necessary. You're doing your job. Without another word, he took Lily's hand. Together they walked toward the glass entrance. Not hurried. Not ashamed. Just quiet. Behind them, whispers spread through the hallway. Some guests looked embarrassed. Others looked amused. Most simply looked away. Because watching injustice was always easier than confronting it. Outside, cool rain filled the night air. The city lights shimmered across wet pavement as father and daughter stood beneath the entrance canopy. Lily remained silent for several moments. Finally, she asked the question children always ask when the world disappoints them. Did we do something wrong? Elias looked toward the rain. No. Then why were they angry? He considered his answer carefully. Sometimes people become so impressed by what someone owns that they stop seeing who that person is. She thought about that, then slipped her small hand into his. I still see you. For the first time that evening. Elias's composure almost broke. He squeezed her hand gently. And that's all that matters. High above the entrance, Victor watched through the ballroom windows as the father and daughter disappeared into the rain. He smiled with quiet satisfaction before turning back to his distinguished guests. He believed the matter was finished. He could not possibly know that less than 12 hours later, the same driveway would fall silent beneath the arrival of an impossibly rare $32 million Rolls-Royce. And every eye that had watched a janitor leave in the rain would watch a billionaire return. The revolving glass doors turned slowly as Victor Ashford stepped into the hotel lobby, bringing with him the quiet confidence of a man who had spent decades believing the world naturally arranged itself around his wishes. His charcoal tuxedo fit with flawless precision, and the polished black shoes reflected the marble floor beneath the towering chandeliers. Conversations softened as executives, investors, and local officials instinctively shifted their attention toward him. Power rarely announced itself. It simply expected to be noticed. Victor acknowledged the greetings with measured nods, offering practiced smiles that never quite reached his eyes. Around him moved assistants, security personnel, and event coordinators, each one carefully anticipating his next request before it was spoken. Tonight's gala celebrated philanthropy. At least, that was the public story. Behind the polished speeches and crystal glasses waited negotiations worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Partnerships would be formed. Competitors quietly measured. Reputations strengthened or destroyed beneath elegant smiles. Victor excelled at that world. He believed success belonged only to those strong enough to seize it. Compassion, in his mind, was useful only when photographers were present. Meanwhile, Elias finished storing his cleaning equipment inside the maintenance room. He washed his hands carefully beneath cold running water, removing every trace of polish and disinfectant before folding his worn sleeves neatly over his wrists. Morning arrived wrapped in cool mist, and the hotel's glass facade reflected a pale sunrise that slowly chased away the night's rain. Employees crossed the polished entrance carrying coffee cups and clipboards, their footsteps echoing softly across the granite forecourt. Delivery vans unloaded flowers, fresh linens, and crates of imported produce while the revolving doors turned with the predictable rhythm of another ordinary business day. Inside, conversations revolved around only one subject. The janitor. Some spoke quietly, embarrassed by what they had witnessed the previous evening. Others defended Victor Ashford, insisting that strict standards were necessary in a luxury establishment. Karen Mitchell heard every version. None of them sat comfortably with her. She stood behind the reception desk reviewing event reports, but her attention kept drifting toward the security office. She had watched the hallway security footage twice before sunrise. Nothing about Elias Rowan's behavior suggested disrespect. He had remained calm, respectful, dignified. Even after being publicly humiliated, the memory lingered like an ache. She remembered the expression on young Lily's face as security escorted them outside. That image had stolen her sleep. Across the lobby, two bellmen spoke in hushed voices. "I've worked here 8 years," one said. "I've never seen Mr. Rowan raise his voice." The other nodded. "He even helped me fix my car after work, without charging anything. And he somehow knew exactly what was wrong." They exchanged puzzled looks. "Doesn't seem like an ordinary janitor." Before either could answer, the deep purr of an approaching engine drifted through the hotel's glass entrance. Not loud. Not aggressive. Smooth. Refined. Every conversation paused. Outside, security guards instinctively straightened. Valets looked toward the circular driveway. The sound grew closer, rich and effortless, unlike anything they heard on a normal morning. Then it appeared. A magnificent deep midnight blue Rolls-Royce boat tail eased beneath the entrance canopy, its hand-polished body reflecting the morning light like liquid sapphire. Chrome accents shimmered against the damp pavement, and every graceful line of the car spoke of craftsmanship beyond imagination. The vehicle looked less like transportation, and more like moving sculpture. No one spoke. One valet whispered almost involuntarily, "That can't be real." Another slowly nodded. "It is. I've only ever seen one in magazines. $32 million. The words barely escaped his lips. The lobby fell completely silent. Even the revolving doors seemed to pause. The chauffeur stepped out first. His dark suit fit with military precision as he calmly opened the rear passenger door. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Every eye remained fixed on the car. Then polished leather shoes touched the pavement. The first employee frowned. Another blinked in disbelief. Karen's clipboard slipped slightly in her hands. The man rising from the rear seat looked strangely familiar. Impeccably tailored charcoal suit. Crisp white shirt. Dark silk tie. Elegant overcoat folded neatly across one arm. No maintenance uniform. No worn work boots. Yet the calm posture. The quiet eyes. The measured movements. There could be no mistake. "Elias," Karen whispered. The name spread through the lobby almost like a breeze. "Elias? The janitor? It can't be." He thanked the chauffeur with a small nod before turning toward the entrance. There was no arrogance in his expression. No desire to impress. He walked exactly as he always had. Steady. Unhurried. Composed. The only difference was that today, everyone was watching. The automatic doors opened. Warm air drifted across the marble lobby as Elias stepped inside. Employees instinctively moved aside. Not because he demanded space. Because something invisible had changed. Respect had entered the room before he did. Karen approached cautiously. "Mr. Rowan." He smiled warmly. "Good morning, Karen." Her voice almost failed. I don't understand." "You don't need to." She searched his face. There was no satisfaction. No trace of revenge for the previous night. Only kindness. The same kindness he had shown every employee for 6 years. Before Karen could ask another question, the concierge hurried across the lobby carrying a sealed leather portfolio. "Sir." He stopped in front of Elias and bowed his head slightly. "This arrived from London before sunrise." Several managers stared. The concierge continued. "The board requested that it be delivered directly to you." Elias accepted the portfolio. "Thank you." He opened it carefully. Inside rested several neatly organized documents and a handwritten note. He read it silently, closed the folder, then looked toward the elevators. It appears today's meeting has become more important than expected. Karen blinked. What meeting? The emergency board session. There isn't one scheduled. There is now. Those nearby exchanged confused glances. Who was calling emergency board meetings? Certainly not a hotel janitor. Before anyone could ask another question, 3 black executive sedans rolled beneath the entrance. Board members from the hotel's parent company stepped out one after another. Senior executives, corporate legal advisors, international financial consultants, people who rarely visited the property. Each entered the lobby with visible urgency. Then something astonishing happened. The chairman of the board saw Elias. Immediately he smiled, walked directly toward him, and extended both hands in greeting. Mr. Rowan, he said respectfully. Thank you for coming. The lobby froze. No one moved. No one breathed. The silence felt heavier than the grand ballroom had the night before. And somewhere upstairs, Victor Ashford had just been informed that the janitor he had thrown into the rain was being welcomed by the board as their most important guest. The executive elevator opened with a soft chime, its brushed steel doors reflecting the anxious faces gathered in the lobby. The chairman stepped aside with quiet respect, inviting Elias to enter first. It was a gesture so subtle that many might have missed it. Yet everyone who saw it understood its meaning. Authority recognized authority. Karen stood motionless near the reception desk, still clutching her clipboard. She watched the elevator doors close and realized something she had never considered before. For 6 years, she had supervised a man she had never truly known. The boardroom occupied the hotel's highest floor, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the waking city. Morning sunlight spread across the polished walnut table, illuminating crystal water glasses, leather portfolios, and digital presentation screens. Several directors were already waiting. Conversation stopped the instant Elias entered. One by one they stood. Not because protocol demanded it. Because respect did. Good morning, Mr. Rowan, the chairman said warmly. I appreciate your coming on such short notice. Elias shook his hand. I understand the situation is urgent. It is. The chairman sighed heavily before activating the large display screen. The structural inspection of the Riverside development was completed overnight. Engineering diagrams filled the monitor. Projected budgets. Foundation reports. Load calculations. $1 billion project. One senior executive spoke with visible concern. Our consulting firms disagree. 3 independent reports. 3 different conclusions. If construction continues, we risk catastrophic financial losses. If we stop construction, shareholders will panic. Silence settled over the room. Then the chairman turned toward Elias. What do you think? Several newly appointed directors exchanged puzzled glances. Who asks a former janitor to evaluate $1 billion engineering project? Elias quietly removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. He studied the drawings without speaking. Minutes passed. The only sounds were the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant traffic beyond the glass walls. Finally, he reached for a marker. Without hesitation, he redrew part of the foundation layout directly onto the digital display. His movements were calm, confident, precise. This support column, he said quietly, was moved 43 centimeters during the second design revision. Several engineers leaned forward. He continued. That forced the entire weight distribution to shift. He drew 3 clean lines. If completed this way, microscopic stress fractures will begin within 5 years. The room remained perfectly still. But if the central support returns to its original position, he adjusted 2 additional measurements. Construction costs decrease by 11%. Completion accelerates by 4 months. And long-term structural integrity improves. Nobody spoke. One senior engineer slowly opened the original archived blueprint. His face drained of color. The original design. He looked back at Elias. Matches exactly. Another engineer hurried through archived calculations. My God! He corrected every error. The financial director reached for a calculator. After several moments, he looked toward the chairman. The savings alone exceed $200 million. The room went completely silent. Not polite silence. Not uncertain silence. The kind of silence that follows undeniable truth. Miles away, Victor Ashford was reviewing media interviews in his private office when his assistant rushed inside without knocking. Sir? Victor frowned. I said no interruptions. I'm sorry. She struggled to catch her breath. You need to see the lobby cameras. Victor looked irritated. What about them? The janitor. Victor laughed dismissively. What about him? He came back. So? He arrived in a Rolls-Royce boat tail. Victor's smile disappeared. What? The board escorted him upstairs. They're meeting with him now. Victor stood so abruptly that his chair rolled backward. Who authorized that? The chairman himself. Victor's jaw tightened. Impossible. But doubt had entered his thoughts for the first time. A small crack. Barely visible. Yet impossible to ignore. Back in the boardroom, the chairman closed the engineering files. You've saved us from making a catastrophic mistake. Elias simply nodded. I'm glad I could help. One director smiled. You always were. The newer executives looked increasingly confused. Finally, one asked the question everyone had been thinking. Forgive me. But how does a hotel janitor know more about structural engineering than 3 international consulting firms? The room grew quiet again. The chairman looked toward Elias. As much or as little as you wish. Elias remained silent for several seconds. His eyes drifted toward the city beyond the windows. Glass towers? Construction cranes. A skyline he had once helped shape. I've spent many years trying to live a quieter life. No one interrupted. I discovered long ago that titles often speak louder than character. He folded his hands calmly. So I stopped introducing myself by what I owned. Another pause. I preferred to be known by how I treated people. Those words lingered in the room. The chairman smiled gently. And yet the world insisted on judging the uniform. Elias gave the faintest smile. It usually does. At that exact moment, the boardroom doors opened. Corporate legal counsel entered carrying a sealed envelope. There is one more matter. The attorney placed the envelope before the chairman. It concerns Mr. Victor Ashford. The chairman opened the documents. His expression changed immediately. What is it? Another director asked. He looked slowly around the table. Evidence. Evidence of financial manipulation, employee intimidation, and deliberate concealment. He closed the folder carefully. It appears. Last night's incident was only the beginning. Far below, Victor Ashford stared out through his office window, watching the city with growing unease. For the first time in years, he no longer felt untouchable. He had humiliated a man whose true identity remained only partially revealed. And he had no idea how much of his own empire was about to collapse. Cold afternoon rain swept across the hotel's panoramic windows, turning the skyline into a blur of steel and silver. The rhythmic tapping of raindrops against the glass blended with the low hum of the building's ventilation system, while inside the executive floor, an uneasy silence lingered over every corridor. Employees walked more slowly than usual, speaking in whispers that dissolved the moment someone approached. The atmosphere had changed. Less than 24 hours after a quiet janitor had been escorted into the rain, the balance of power inside the hotel had begun to shift. But Victor Ashford refused to believe that power could ever truly leave his hands. He stood alone in his private office, his reflection stretched across the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. The city he had spent decades conquering spread beneath his gaze, yet for the first time in years, it offered no comfort. His jaw remained clenched as he replayed the morning's humiliation in his mind. The board had greeted Elias Rowan with respect. Not courtesy. Respect. Victor could still hear the chairman's voice echoing through the conference room. Thank you for coming, Mr. Rowan. The words irritated him more than any public insult ever could. He refused to accept that a man who had spent years pushing a mop through hotel corridors could suddenly become the center of attention. There has to be something, he muttered. There always is. His assistant, Claire Benson, entered cautiously, carrying a leather folder thick with documents. You asked for everything we could find. Victor took the folder without looking at her. Employment records. Tax information. Background investigations. Personnel evaluations. Every page described the same quiet employee. Reliable. Professional. Never absent without reason. Never disciplined. Never promoted. No complaints. No scandals. Nothing. Victor slammed the folder shut. No one becomes who he was this morning without leaving a trail. Claire hesitated. There is one unusual detail. Victor looked up. What? His employment references. What about them? They're all legitimate. She paused. But none of them actually identify who recommended him. Victor frowned. What does that mean? It means someone with extraordinary authority verified his credentials without ever revealing their identity. The office fell silent. Victor's instincts sharpened. Someone powerful had been protecting Elias for years. Meanwhile, several floors below, Elias sat quietly in a small employee cafe, far removed from the executive suites. Steam rose gently from a plain ceramic mug filled with black coffee. Around him, kitchen staff laughed softly between lunch preparations, while dishwashers rattled in the distance. He preferred this room. No polished speeches. No expensive suits. Just honest work. Karen entered carrying 2 sandwiches wrapped in brown paper. I thought you might have forgotten lunch. He smiled warmly. Thank you. She sat across from him, studying his face with genuine curiosity. I've been trying to understand something. What is it? You could have embarrassed everyone this morning. He remained silent. You could have walked through that lobby and announced exactly who you were. Still, he said nothing. Karen continued. Instead, you acted exactly the same. Elias looked toward the kitchen, where a young dishwasher struggled to carry an overloaded tray. Without interrupting the conversation, he stood, crossed the room, and quietly helped the young man steady the stack before returning to his seat. Only then did he answer. Character shouldn't change when circumstances do. Karen lowered her eyes. I don't know many people like you. There are more than you think. They're simply quieter. Before she could respond, Elias's phone vibrated. The screen displayed only one word. Lily. His expression softened instantly. He answered. Hi, sweetheart. Her cheerful voice filled the line. Dad! Guess what? What? I got first chair for the concert. His smile widened. I knew you could. I wasn't sure. You practiced. So did you. She laughed. He chuckled softly. When do I ever practice? Being my dad. His eyes closed briefly. The weight of every difficult year suddenly felt lighter. I'll be there tonight. You promise? I promise. Promises mattered. Especially to children who had already lost one parent. Across town, another meeting was taking place. Not inside a boardroom. Inside the offices of a private investigations firm. Victor Ashford sat across from a former intelligence analyst named Martin Doyle. A large monitor displayed photographs gathered over decades. One image showed Elias standing beside a research laboratory. Another captured him leaving an international technology conference nearly 15 years earlier. The next showed newspaper headlines. But every headline had one strange characteristic. The name had been removed. Faces blurred. Corporate logos obscured. Someone had erased the public record with astonishing precision. Martin leaned back. I've never seen anything like this. Victor folded his arms. So whoever this man is, he didn't disappear by accident. You think he was hiding? Martin shook his head slowly. No. I think someone helped the entire world stop looking. Victor stared at the photographs. His frustration evolved into something new. Fear. Not panic. Not yet. But enough to make him uncomfortable. If I can't destroy his past. He looked toward Martin. I'll destroy his present. The investigator frowned. What exactly does that mean? Victor smiled. Coldly. It means no one will believe him long enough for the truth to matter. Outside, thunder rolled across the darkening skyline. Rain struck the windows harder now. As if the city itself sensed the storm gathering. And somewhere inside that storm, a father who had spent years protecting his daughter from his past was about to discover that the past had finally begun searching for him. The rain had stopped by early evening, but the city still carried the scent of wet asphalt and cold concrete. Street lights shimmered in shallow puddles outside the hotel, while inside, the atmosphere had become noticeably tense. Employees who usually exchanged cheerful greetings now spoke in cautious whispers. Rumors had spread faster than facts, and uncertainty had settled over every department like a heavy fog. Elias left the hotel shortly before sunset, his tailored jacket folded neatly over one arm. Instead of climbing into the Rolls-Royce waiting discreetly across the street, he chose to walk the final blocks to Lily's school. He had always believed that the shortest path between two places was not measured in distance. It was measured in presence. The school auditorium glowed with warm amber light. Parents filled the wooden seats, programs resting in their laps as the orchestra tuned their instruments. Violins sang quiet scales, cellos answered in deep harmony, and nervous children adjusted collars and music stands beneath the bright stage lights. Elias slipped quietly into the back row. Just in time. The conductor raised his baton. Silence settled over the room. Then Lily stepped forward with her violin. She stood a little taller than she had only days before. Not because life had become easier. Because she had learned something from watching her father. Dignity could stand upright even after humiliation. The first notes floated through the auditorium, clear and confident. Elias listened without moving, pride filling a part of his heart that words could never fully describe. For a few precious minutes, there were no billionaires, no board meetings, no secrets. Only music. Only a father watching his daughter become exactly who she was meant to be. When the performance ended, applause filled the hall. Lily spotted him immediately. You came! I promised. She ran into his arms, violin case swinging behind her. I wasn't nervous once I saw you. You were never alone. Those simple words meant more to her than any standing ovation. The peaceful moment lasted only until they reached the school entrance. 2 police vehicles waited outside. Their emergency lights flashed silently against the wet pavement. A detective stepped forward. Mr. Elias Rowan? Yes. I'm Detective Samuel Ortiz. He removed a folded document from his coat. We have a warrant requiring your presence for questioning regarding allegations of financial fraud and identity falsification. Parents nearby stopped walking. Teachers exchanged worried glances. Lily tightened her grip on her father's hand. There must be some mistake, she whispered. Elias read the warrant carefully. His expression never changed. He looked at the detective. I'll cooperate. The detective nodded respectfully. I expected you would. One officer quietly added. You are not under arrest at this time, but we must ask you to come with us. Lily's voice trembled. Dad? He knelt in front of her. His calm never wavered. Look at me. She did. Remember what I told you. When people forget kindness, we don't forget ours. She finished softly. He smiled. Exactly. Karen, who had arrived to support Lily after the concert, placed a comforting hand on the girl's shoulder as Elias stepped toward the waiting vehicle. Reporters, somehow already alerted, began gathering across the street. Camera flashes pierced the evening darkness. Someone shouted questions. Mr. Rowan! Are the accusations true? Were you pretending to be someone else? Elias never answered. He simply entered the police car with the same quiet composure he had shown the night he was thrown out of the hotel. Across the city, Victor Ashford watched the breaking news on a large television inside his office. The headlines spread rapidly across every financial network. Mysterious businessman questioned amid fraud allegations. Victor leaned back slowly. For the first time in 2 days, he smiled. "It won't matter who he really is," he murmured. "People always remember suspicion longer than truth." His legal advisor hesitated. "Sir, if these accusations fail." "They won't." "And if they do?" Victor looked toward the city lights. "By then, the damage will already be done." Inside police headquarters, Detective Ortiz placed a folder on the interview table. The room was quiet, illuminated only by soft fluorescent lights. "I've read your file," the detective admitted. "Something about it doesn't make sense." Elias remained silent. "The evidence arrived anonymously. So did the financial records. And every accusation depends on documents no one can verify." He folded his hands. "What are you asking?" The detective looked him directly in the eye. "I'm asking whether someone powerful wants you discredited." Elias considered the question. Finally, he answered. "Power often fears what it cannot control." Before the detective could continue, the interview room door opened. A uniformed officer entered quickly. "Sir? What is it?" "You need to see this." The officer handed him a sealed envelope marked with the insignia of a prestigious international law firm. Inside was a single certified document. The detective's eyes widened as he read it. He looked up at Elias in disbelief. "This changes everything." "What does?" Elias asked calmly. The detective placed the document on the table. "It confirms ownership." "Ownership of what?" The detective drew a slow breath. "The parent holding company. The charitable foundation that controls this hotel. Lists you as its sole founder and lifetime trustee." Silence filled the room. Heavy. Unavoidable. The detective understood immediately. Someone had not merely accused an innocent man. Someone had attempted to frame the very person who ultimately owned the institution where the humiliation had begun. Far across the city, Victor Ashford remained unaware that the carefully constructed case against Elias had just begun to collapse. The first crack had appeared. By morning, the entire structure of his deception would begin to fall. Morning sunlight poured through the towering windows of the hotel's grand ballroom, washing the polished marble floor in pale gold. Less than 48 hours earlier, the same room had echoed with polite laughter while a quiet janitor and his daughter were escorted into the rain. Today, the atmosphere could not have been more different. The crystal chandeliers still glittered overhead, the velvet drapes still framed the city skyline, and the same polished chairs stood in perfect rows. Yet beneath the elegance lingered something far heavier than wealth. Expectation. Every seat was occupied. Board members, senior executives, hotel employees, investors, legal advisors, journalists, and city officials had all gathered under an emergency notice issued before sunrise. News crews waited outside the building. Inside, no one spoke above a whisper. The ballroom remembered. So did the people. Karen Mitchell stood quietly near the rear entrance, her hands clasped tightly together. She recognized nearly every face in the room, but today they looked different. Some carried regret. Others looked anxious. A few refused to meet anyone's eyes. No one knew exactly what was about to happen. Only that the truth had finally arrived. The double doors opened. Every conversation stopped. Elias Rowan entered first. He wore the same charcoal suit from the previous morning, perfectly tailored but completely unpretentious. His expression remained calm, his posture relaxed, and his pace unhurried. Beside him walked Detective Samuel Ortiz and two senior attorneys representing the Rowan Foundation. Behind them came the chairman of the parent company, followed by independent auditors carrying sealed evidence cases. No applause greeted Elias. None was needed. Respect filled the silence instead. Karen lowered her head slightly as he passed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Elias stopped. There is nothing for you to apologize for. I should have done more. You tried. I didn't stop it. He offered a gentle smile. Sometimes courage begins by refusing to look away the next time. Tears formed in Karen's eyes. Those simple words lifted a burden she had carried since the gala. Across the room, Victor Ashford entered through a side door accompanied by his legal team. His confidence remained carefully rehearsed, but the cracks were now visible. His tie had been adjusted 3 times before entering. His smile appeared only when someone looked directly at him. His hands never stopped moving. He noticed Elias immediately. Their eyes met across the ballroom. Victor expected anger. He found none. That unsettled him more than any accusation ever could. The chairman called the meeting to order. This emergency session concerns allegations of misconduct, financial manipulation, abuse of authority, and the events witnessed in this ballroom 2 evenings ago. Every camera focused forward. The first attorney approached the presentation screen. We will begin with verified evidence. The ballroom lights dimmed. Security footage appeared on the enormous display. There stood Elias, still wearing his maintenance uniform, standing quietly beside Lily, doing nothing more than waiting. The recording continued without interruption. Victor's voice echoed through the speakers. This event costs more than you'll earn in several lifetimes. A murmur spread across the audience. The video continued. Security. Escort him outside. Every word sounded harsher than anyone remembered. The cameras captured Lily lowering her head. Captured Elias comforting her. Captured security apologizing. Captured father and daughter walking into the rain. When the recording ended, no one moved. Silence settled over the ballroom. Not uncomfortable silence. Judgment. The chairman spoke quietly. This recording was never submitted during our initial review. He turned toward the head of hotel security. Why? The security director stood slowly. My office received written instructions to archive it without review. From whom? He swallowed. Mr. Victor Ashford. Dozens of eyes turned toward Victor. His attorney rose immediately. My client denies issuing. The second attorney interrupted. We anticipated that response. Another document appeared on the screen. Digitally authenticated. Time-stamped. Personally authorized. Victor's electronic signature appeared unmistakably across the bottom. The denial died before it could finish. The evidence continued. Financial records. Private emails. Witness testimony. Independent forensic accounting reports. Each piece revealed another layer of deception. Victor had pressured employees to alter expense reports. He had threatened promotions to silence complaints. He had redirected charitable donations through companies he secretly controlled. Every revelation deepened the growing silence. Karen looked around the ballroom. Some executives stared at the floor. Others removed their glasses and rubbed tired eyes. The illusion of Victor Ashford's greatness was dissolving in real time. Finally, Detective Ortiz approached the podium carrying a single sealed envelope. This, he said calmly, concerns the allegations brought against Mr. Elias Rowan. He opened the file. Our investigation confirms that every accusation filed against Mr. Rowan originated through falsified documentation submitted anonymously. He paused. The digital trail leading to those submissions has now been independently verified. The room seemed to hold its breath. The detective looked directly toward Victor. The origin of those falsified records traces back to servers owned by Ashford Development Holdings. Victor's face lost its color. His attorney whispered urgently beside him. But the damage had already been done. Truth, once spoken clearly enough, could no longer be negotiated. The chairman slowly stood. His voice remained calm. Before this meeting concludes, there is one final matter the board believes every person in this room deserves to understand. He turned toward Elias. Mr. Rowan, would you be willing to tell them who you really are? The ballroom became perfectly still. Every eye rested on the quiet man who had once pushed a mop across these same marble floors. Elias rose slowly. not to defend himself, but to tell the truth. The ballroom was so quiet that the faint hum of the chandeliers seemed louder than the breathing of the hundreds gathered beneath them. Morning sunlight stretched across the polished marble, touching the very spot where Elias and Lily had stood only 2 nights earlier while the room watched in silence. Elias walked toward the podium with the same measured pace he had carried through every chapter of his life. Not hurried. Not triumphant. Simply steady. He rested one hand lightly on the edge of the podium before looking across the audience. "I've spent many years avoiding rooms like this," he began softly. His voice never needed to rise. The silence carried it to every corner. "Not because I fear judgment." He paused. "But because I learned that people often stop seeing one another the moment titles enter the conversation." No one interrupted. 21 years ago, I founded Rowan Integrated Systems." Several executives exchanged startled glances. The company had become legendary for pioneering sustainable engineering and ethical infrastructure before disappearing from public leadership. "I loved building things," Elias continued. "Buildings. Bridges. Teams. Ideas." His eyes drifted toward the windows overlooking the city skyline. "But the greatest thing I ever built was my family." The room remained motionless. "When my wife, Emma, died in an accident that should never have happened, every newspaper wanted a headline. Every camera wanted a photograph. Every investor wanted certainty. I wanted peace." He lowered his eyes briefly. "So I sold the company. I placed nearly everything I owned into an independent charitable foundation. I stepped away. I chose to become anonymous." The chairman nodded quietly. "The Rowan Foundation has funded hospitals, engineering scholarships, disaster relief, and employee education programs on 4 continents." A presentation appeared on the large screen. Photographs of schools, medical centers, community housing, research laboratories. None carried Elias's name. None displayed his face. One board member whispered, almost to himself, "He never wanted the credit." Elias smiled faintly. "Good work doesn't become more valuable because someone applauds it." The room absorbed the words in complete silence. Then he looked toward Victor. "I accepted work here because I wanted Lily to grow up seeing that honest work has dignity." His voice softened. "I never wanted her to believe that respect belongs only to wealthy people." Karen wiped away another tear. Several hotel employees quietly lowered their heads. They remembered every morning Elias had greeted them before sunrise. Every tray he had lifted. Every broken machine he had repaired. Every coworker he had helped without expecting recognition. He had never acted like he was above anyone. Because he never believed he was. The chairman stood once more. "The board has reached its decision." He opened the official resolution. "Effective immediately. Victor Ashford is removed from all executive authority." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. "The findings of financial misconduct, abuse of authority, retaliation against employees, and attempted falsification of evidence will be referred to the appropriate legal authorities." Victor slowly rose from his chair. His confidence had disappeared. He looked older. Smaller. Not because his wealth had vanished. Because the illusions surrounding it had. He turned toward Elias. "I made a mistake." Elias met his eyes calmly. "Yes. I judged you." "You did." Victor hesitated. "I don't expect forgiveness," Elias answered without hesitation. "Forgiveness and consequences are not enemies." The sentence settled heavily across the room. "I hope one day you become the man your success convinced you already were." Victor lowered his head. For the first time in many years, he had nothing to say. Later that afternoon, employees gathered once more in the hotel lobby. The atmosphere had transformed completely. Not into celebration. Into gratitude. The chairman addressed the staff. "Mr. Rowan has declined every executive position we offered." Several people smiled. That somehow seemed exactly like him. Instead, he requested only 3 things. A new presentation appeared. The Rowan Employee Education Fund. Every hotel employee's child would receive scholarship opportunities. The Family Emergency Assistance Program. No worker facing medical or family hardship would stand alone. The Dignity Initiative. Mandatory leadership training emphasizing respect for every employee regardless of position. The lobby erupted into heartfelt applause. Not for wealth. For character. Karen approached Elias one final time. "What will you do now?" He glanced toward the entrance. Outside, Lily waited beside the Rolls-Royce, violin case in one hand and a bright smile on her face. "I think," he said gently, "I'll keep my most important job." He walked toward his daughter. She slipped her hand into his exactly as she had the night they were sent into the rain. "Ready to go home, Dad?" "I've been ready all day." Together they stepped into the waiting car. The chauffeur quietly closed the door. The magnificent Rolls-Royce pulled away from the hotel, disappearing into the afternoon traffic without fanfare. Inside the lobby, no one watched the car for long. Instead, they watched one another. Receptionists greeted housekeepers by name. Managers thanked maintenance workers. Bellmen held doors open for kitchen staff. Something invisible had changed. Not because a billionaire had fallen. Because ordinary people had remembered the value of one another. The marble floors still reflected the chandeliers. The hotel remained just as beautiful. But beauty finally had the company of humility. And perhaps that was the greater transformation. Because in the end, a man's worth is never measured by the car that carries him, the title on his office door, or the fortune attached to his name. It is measured by the dignity he gives others when no one is watching, for the strongest men never need status to prove they matter.